Hello again, everybody. This is John and Glenn with BestPriceNutrition.com. Today we're going to do a video on some studies that came out earlier in the year on the risk of TMAO and cardiovascular disease. This came up when I did the video on carnitine. Somebody had asked, said, oh, I got to avoid carnitine because it's going to cause me to have atherosclerosis. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to do that. I told the individual that we'd do a video on it. Yeah, so that's the genesis as to why we're doing this video today. So anyways, going into it, basically what we have is a group of studies that were done by Cleveland Clinic researchers, respected institution. And what they were researching is the correlation between eggs and meat intake. Basically choline, phosphatidylcholine, and carnitine. Meat is rich in carnitine, eggs are rich in choline. And what those all have in common is they're TMAO, or trimethylamine precursors. Mm-hmm. So they wanted to research this, blah, 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 and basically when it hit the media, there was all the hysteria. I know you remember.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions we got on it. It was in the news, and there was this big fear now of, oh, I can't eat eggs, I can't eat meat, so a lot of these people were looking at it like, oh, am I doing this all wrong?
Yeah, but if it's on the news, it's true, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Just like, remember, fish oil causes prostate cancer? That was the other one?
Great doctor come out and say something about it today.
Yes, yeah, I think Dr. Oz rescinded his former recommendation for people to supplement with carnitine and so on and so forth, which is just an overreaction. But we'll go through this stuff. So I want to cover this with you guys. First, real quick, just some background. So the original study was they basically took 40 healthy adults and they had them come in and they had them eat hard-boiled eggs, 2 of them, which was the equivalent of 250 milligrams of choline. Mm-hmm. And then they also labeled a capsule with another, let's see, I think it was 250 milligrams of deuterium-labeled phosphatidylcholine. Deuterium is just an isotope of hydrogen, so we can see it labeled so we know where it's going. Mm-hmm. And what they found was that the TMAO levels went up. That's the oxide of TMA, okay? And they found that those levels went up. So they said, oh, that's interesting. When they eat this choline and phosphatidylcholine, levels go up. Okay? Yeah. So then what they did was they took some of the subjects and they had them take broad-spectrum antibiotics. And the idea was to get rid of the gut flora. Because the theory is that the gut bacteria are what's responsible for converting the TMA into TMAO and so on and so forth. Or actually the choline into TMA in this particular study. And then your liver then converts it into its oxide TMAO. So they did that study and they found that when they gave them broad-spectrum antibiotics, you didn't get that conversion into TMA. So they said, oh, okay, so, interesting. And then they had them come back and repeat it, but this time without the broad-spectrum antibiotics. And they got similar results to the first visit. Mm-hmm. They did the same thing in another study with, I believe they used 6 ounces of red meat, which would be the carnitine. So that's the relationship. So some people were confused, hey, is it choline, carnitine, phosphatidylcholine? They're all related in the sense that they're trimethylamine precursors. So that's where that all comes into play. They then took this research and extrapolated it out to some epidemiological studies, about 4,000 individuals, and they said, hey, is there a correlation between high levels of TMAO and atherosclerosis or coronary heart disease? So and they were able to find some links and so on and so forth. But number one, when we're talking about observational research, they can't establish cause. They can find correlations, but causation they cannot establish. That can only be done by controlled trials. Yeah. So that's a really, really important note. So basically what we want to do is cover this in depth. So as we said, TMA, when it comes into your body, more or less it's going to get converted into TMAO, it's oxide. Mm-hmm. So, well, why is that happening? Why does your body have an enzyme or a mechanism to do that? These are the questions that came into my head. So the idea put forth by the researchers, again, is that gut bacteria is going to convert the choline, phosphatidylcholine, or carnitine, okay, into TMA. Your liver then converts it into TMAO. Oh, then what does this do? So the theory then put out is that it inhibits reverse cholesterol transport, which is basically taking the cholesterol out of macrophages and inhibiting and basically helping your body to excrete it, to get rid of it. Okay, it's inhibiting that process.
Your body's going to use cholesterol as think of it as the putty to repair the lining of your blood vessels. So it does serve an important role in the body. So just wanted to give that.
Yeah, exactly. There's a reason why you make cholesterol, and there's a. We'll cover that in a second, but that's the theory. The theory is that TMAO suppresses this reverse cholesterol transport. So and that is all based on the notion that cholesterol is then the cause behind atherosclerosis, okay? And that's debatable, and we'll cover that a little bit. So they basically were saying that humans who eat a lot of meat and eggs and stuff are at a greater risk, okay? And this is really nothing new because you know the lipid hypothesis.
There's a guy named Ansel Keys. I believe he was the head of the American Heart Association, I think, but he's a very powerful man. He looked at numerous countries, and he started with a hypothesis, though, that cholesterol caused atherosclerosis.
Thickening of the arteries.
Yes, you just think of thickening the arteries. And he singled out 6 countries that sort of fit his hypothesis. And the hypothesis is that, you know, cholesterol causes heart disease, and there's a correlation between heart disease and increased intake of saturated fats. So he selected out those, and he was basically going to say, or said that fat is bad, eat more carbs. And you know, nowadays there's the new thing of, okay, carbs are bad, fat's good for you. So it's sort of, we've changed over the years.
And somewhat, yeah, and there's still a lot of fat bashing that goes on too and stuff like that, and we'll get into that a little bit, but so the real predictor here is what's going on is it's your gut flora that is responsible for this conversion. And the theory is that vegans, vegetarians have a different gut flora, and they did test this, and they do not end up with as high levels of TMA and ultimately TMAO.
Yeah.
Because their gut flora is, you know, inherently you're going to have less of that bacteria that's going to then ferment the carnitine, choline, what have you.
Yeah. So,
and specifically the genus we're talking about are Prevotella. Now, interestingly enough, if you look at it, about 75% of omnivores and 90% of vegetarians they found have normal TMAO levels. So what about the remaining group, the 25% omnivores and the 10% of vegetarians that have higher levels, elevated levels of TMAO? What's their deal? Well, they have more of this Prevotella bacteria. So if anything, you'd say that the gut flora is a better predictor than what you eat. Now, you could argue that what you eat does determine what you have in your gut. That's true, you know. As always, we recommend a nutrient-dense diet with variety because that's going to be the best way to have, you know, a healthy gut flora. You know, with fiber, fruit, vegetables, and meats, fish. And again, this is not to talk people out who are vegans or vegetarians. If you are for moral reasons, you know, we're not here to tell you not to do it. I mean, that's fine. You can find healthy ways to do that. If you're doing it because you think it's healthier than a nutrient-dense omnivore diet, that's just not the case. It's simply not true.
You know, as you were saying that, I was thinking of a question we might get, and I see that there's a 75% of omnivores and 90% of vegetarians, so automatically people are going to say, oh, the vegetarians, though, they have the 15% less than the normal TMAO levels. But when you look at people who are generally omnivores, a lot of people who do eat red meat, a lot of them are not only eating red meat, there's so many other foods they're eating, and they may not have the greatest diet. The people who are vegetarians generally tend to work out. They're eating more vegetables, more fruits, things like that. So whereas the people who are in the class of they're eating more red meat, they may not get those vegetables or as much vegetables as fruits and things like that. They may not be working out as much as a vegetarian because people who are vegetarians generally stick to a very regimented diet and they are exercising.
They're more health conscious because they have the discipline to eliminate an entire category of foods, okay, which is usually correlated with other, you know, good habits, like you said, exercise and other things like that. They've shown that discipline. Whereas if you're an omnivore, you have not really necessarily eliminated any group of food on purpose. You kind of, in theory, that does not mean that, oh, you can't be an omnivore and be healthy. You know, indiscriminate food elimination, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Again, unless it's, you know, for some moral or the reason. I get it. I'm not here to talk you out of it, but that doesn't mean, like you said, if you tell everybody, you know, red meat's bad, saturated fat's bad, you know, well, who are the people that are going to avoid it? Well, pretty much health-conscious people, if they believe that, if they don't have time to research it and stuff like that. So it's more of a correlation versus causation thing. So that's definitely true. So bottom line is that it's gut flora that's going to, you know, determine your TMAO levels, not necessarily what you eat. And we still have this conclusion, though, that even if all this is true, your TMAO levels are higher, and that leading to higher cholesterol, does that in fact lead to heart disease and atherosclerosis specifically? Well, no. I mean, really? I mean, that's correlated. That's like you said, that's the putty that's there to repair damage to blood vessels. And it's like saying when the cops show up, the cops are the cause of the crime. You know, there's other things that are a part of that putty too. Now, here's what we do know causes disease and problems. Chronic caloric surplus, eating more than you burn chronically with a lack of physical activity. Those two things, more than anything, are going to cause you to have various problems. Because the people who have, because there's some variance in terms of how efficiently people process TMAO. In fact, the researchers themselves even noted that there is effective urinary clearance of TMAO. They've even they acknowledged that in the study itself. So that's interesting right there. So again, if you're not active and you're overeating, those are the things that are the greatest predictors. You know, everyone's always after demonizing a certain food, or it's this or it's that, when in reality it's not necessarily what doesn't matter, because it does matter, because you should eat nutrient-dense foods majority. You can have, you know, if you're an active person, your margin for error is greater. You can have, I hate using the word like dirty foods or things like that, but things that are not necessarily considered nutrient-dense. So for instance, you know, my bananas, I've had my nutrient-dense foods, my fruit, my vegetables, my meat, things like that. But then I want some candy or something like that. If that's making up, you know, 10, 20% of my caloric intake, and I'm really active, and I'm not on some chronic caloric surplus with a lack of physical activity, that's okay. Yeah, it's likely not going to cause you a problem if you're an otherwise healthy individual.
It's the people who aren't eating the bananas, the fruits, the vegetables, you know, the healthy nutrient-dense foods, and they're continually eating these dirty
non-nutrient,
let's say non-nutrient,
which are easy to fill up on too. So it's kind of like twofold. It's a lot easier to eat, you know, bowls full of gummy bears versus a bowl full of like fresh fruit, for instance, because they're less satiating. So they kind of go hand in hand. Typically, when you eat those non-nutrient dense foods beyond some certain level, it's easier to eat more of them. So you tend to end up in that caloric surplus as well. And then some of the people who tend to do that more frequently are also those who have a lack of physical activity. So that's the other thing to consider. And if TMA were so bad, fish would be bad. Yeah. Because fish are loaded with it. Yeah. There's much higher levels of TMA in fish than there is in red meat. So,
and we all know that you know, an increased consumption of fish actually is healthy for you. So automatically that tells you, okay, well, I'm eating fish, I should have these huge levels of TMAO, I should have all these, you know, there should be more prevalence of atherosclerosis in people that eat fish, but that's just not the case.
Yeah, and there's a negative feedback loop too with TMAO. Specifically, there's an enzyme that oxidizes TMA to TMAO. It's induced by bile acids. As bile acids raise TMAO levels, TMAO suppresses bile acid production, so you have a natural negative feedback loop. So there's a biological and healthful use of TMAO within your body as well. As we said, your body has a way to get rid of it. So the point here is that it's really a stretch to just say, well, this is somehow a cause. And again, we already established that the kind of study that was done, you know, looking at the 4,000 individuals, is observational. It cannot establish cause. No. It's not possible. You want to do a study to prove this? Get two groups together, control the variables, give one group a bunch of carnitine, give the other a placebo, you know, even make it a crossover trial where you switch them at some point, or the problem would be the following long enough term. You'd have to follow them long enough term to get heart disease. So it'd have to be a really long-term controlled trial to do it. But bottom line is then we could start talking about establishing cause, but even then you don't get gospel out of it. You know, it's got to be something that's got to be repeated as well. So.
It's just not an easy study to put together.
Yeah, and some other notes here from the researchers. Well, one thing is the research, and it's a you know, a conflict of interest, if you will, or a I forget the word here I'm looking for, but it is disclosed as well that the researchers do hold a patent for testing for levels of TMAO. They have a test or a mechanism thing that they're looking to patent, and I'll put the link to it below. So and that was revealed as a competing interest. So just to be clear, so. And that doesn't mean that, you know, when somebody has a competing interest that all the research is bunk. It's just something that you should keep in mind when you're looking at it. It's context. So it's something that I would definitely consider. And the other thing that they did recommend, and I want to read the recommendation because they specifically recommend a high fiber vegetarian diet as a remedy to this, and they're ignoring a lot of other research to the contrary is the point. And also they're ignoring a lot of the benefits of carnitine. I mean, carnitine is essential. It plays a key role in cellular metabolism, you know, transporting fat into the mitochondria. So, you know, in fact, having low levels of carnitine, like most things, can be quite detrimental. So those are other things that need to be considered as well. You know,
yeah, and they also talk about lowering or reducing total choline intake. In general, a lot of us are deficient in choline, and there's not a lot of choline in a vegetarian diet. So they actually say that the choline is a semi-essential nutrient and should not be completely eliminated. So they're telling you should avoid it, but then they're saying don't completely eliminate it. It can result in a deficiency state. So they say, what is it? Standard dietary recommendations, if adopted, will limit the intake of phosphatidylcholine and choline-rich foods, since these foods are typically high in fat and cholesterol content.
Yeah, and they suggest an alternative therapeutic intervention is targeting the composition of your gut bacteria with either a functional food such as a probiotic. And we sell probiotics, but even there we'd have to see more research too to demonstrate that. I think there's been some positive research showing them that they can be therapeutic, but that's not a panacea either. So the bottom line is, the whole lesson from this should be, again, is to eat a nutrient-dense diet majority, you know what I mean? If you want to have some snacks, within it and you're active, then you've got some room there to play with, and we have a video explaining, because even defining nutrient density becomes this whole other slippery slope, because, for instance, I can give you an orange and I could say it's very nutrient-dense in terms of vitamin C, but not in protein, you know what I mean? So it's what are you defining it as? But as a general rule of thumb, is it nutrient dense in something? You know what I mean? I can't really say a gummy bear is nutrient dense in anything.
Sugar.
Carbohydrates, which, you need some, but it's they're easy to come by, so you can get them elsewhere. So, and we're not carb bashers either, so I want people to understand that as well. When we talk about the macronutrients, there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. And when you are cutting calories, carbohydrates are going to be the most dispensable macronutrient. That being said, if your activity level and goals warrant it, and you have room, then you have carbohydrates, of course. And many people perform better, maybe at the sacrifice of some of their fat and protein intake. If it's met, once they meet those floor levels of protein and fat, you can play with your carbohydrate levels and stuff like that too. So that's something else to consider. So, anyone who's taking carnitine as a supplement, we have a video on it to go through the different forms of it: acetyl, L-carnitine, L-carnitine, L-tartrate. Don't, Dr. Oz's panic article, don't do it, this and that. I don't know how much of that's CYA, and I don't know why there's any CYA there, because you don't have to worry about that. But really here the focus is more on diet, and, if you do things in moderation, as we know, it's fine. It's the dose that makes the poison, and that's always going to be true. Yeah,
what we're saying is don't be afraid to eat red meat or eggs or choline-rich foods, carnitine-rich foods.
Fish.
Obviously, fish. Fish is loaded with TMA and TMAO.
So a lot of the problem, guys, when you see these studies and they come out in the media and it's this or it's that, or we had the one with the prostate cancer linked to omega-3. It was such a bunk study, because that one was such nonsense, because they didn't start measuring omega-3 intake until after people were diagnosed. So inevitably, if somebody gets diagnosed with prostate cancer, they might actually start supplementing with omega-3 or eating more cold water fish. So, making that correlate, it's so beyond ridiculous. So, and then when it has a name like Cleveland Clinic behind it, people are like, And as I always say, credentials are nice. We have credentials, but impressive credentials don't mean superior knowledge. They don't mean the right answer. In fact, many of the silliest, dumbest myths that we have to contend with come from people with really impressive credentials. No matter where they come from. We had one, there was some doctor on the Dr. Oz show, and in one of the videos I did, I explained, she told people, hey, if you eat after 6 o'clock, girl, that's going to stick to your hips or something stupid like that.
And it's like, okay, let's not eat throughout the entire day and only eat after 6, and then compare someone who eats throughout the day and doesn't eat after 6. Same calorie amount.
Same activity level.
Same activity level, no difference.
Yeah,
but
so
eating after 6 though is
that's ridiculous. And you hear in these myths, they just make you want to pull your hair out sometimes. But
his is already coming out. So.
Thank you. It's not coming out. This is I have a long forehead to deal with it. So anyways, that's the long and the short of it. So take a breath, analyze it, ask questions like compared to what evidence do you have? And, if you're not sure, you can ask us. So you really sometimes have to think about some of this stuff, because when it gets in the media, it's just like, you have untrained people that are, reading a prompter and telling you, like we had the lady in San Francisco reading the name of pilots.
They'll read anything that's put in front of them.
So the thing that Ron Burgundy will read it on if you put it.
Ron Burgundy?
Yeah, they'll read it. So keep that in mind as well, and don't let somebody just with impressive credentials. That should never be a reason to believe in something, or any individual person. Don't let the halo effect, get you. Don't let the middle ground fallacy get you. do your research. You know, look
Yeah,
at
be
the
skeptical.
actual evidence. You know what I mean? Yeah, you don't have to be a cynic, but you can be skeptical. Say, oh, maybe that makes sense, but you know, let me check this and that. And again, there's research on the other side of things that will typically counter that. So, anyways, I hope we covered it. You know, you don't have to worry if you're, you know, taking your carnitine or choline-rich foods or supplements. Don't worry about it, because this is really, I think we covered how it's kind of bugs. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, so if you guys have any questions, post them in the comment section or video or blog. We're happy to answer them. Also, you can check us out at facebook.com/bestpricenutrition. If you like the video below, please feel free to like it. We appreciate that. And thank you for watching.
Thank you.